Okay, guess what? This video is going to be emphasizing on Boost Week, how to prep for it, why you want to prep for it, and all that jazz. This is going to lead more into the advanced stuff, and if you haven't seen the video where I actually did an add-on to why you should affix, how you can view fixing and all that jazz, upper right hand corner, or like right above my head and in the description. So, it's going to be broken down into various concepts and points. You want to look in the description for the time skips, go ahead and do so. Let's get right into it. You might be asking me, what is a boost week? Why do I hear this term? What is a fix week? I would lean more on the latter and just call it a fix week compared to boost week, because boost week can mean other things as well, such as getting an experience boost or a rare drop rate boost. That is technically quote unquote a boost week, but most of the time when people use boost week, it's in reference to a passive ability or a passive boost towards affixing or grinding and whatnot. You will see more details on the websites depending on what version of the game you're playing. If you're playing North America, go to the North American one. If you're playing on Japanese PSO2, you can go to the Japanese PSO2 or use Bump as the translated version for the Japanese stuff. So yeah, you want to make sure that, you know, if you hear something about this, you prep yourself for it, and these points are going to cover that. Point number 1. Are you going to do something with this affix week boost? Depending on what the number is, this does play a factor into if you are going to do something. However, hopefully if it's a 10% or 15%, you plan to use it. I advise you to actually go ahead and take advantage of that boost compared to like something of a 5%. 5%, I can understand why you might want to ignore it. But 10%, and especially a fucking 15%, you will want to take full advantage of. Guess what? For the Japanese PS2 on the 12th of August, and then later on in September as well. I already talked about it in my separate videos. If you want to know the dates, I will have the information on Bump with that web panel in the description. But you will want to take advantage of this. You want to prepare for that affix week. It is a fucking 15%. 15 goddamn percent. That is big. Like, you might be saying more if it's not that big. No, it's fucking big, especially in terms of you trying to upslot into a higher number, like 7 slot to 8 slot. You know how much of a pain I had to deal with? Look above my fucking head and look at that damn live example that I had to deal with. That is fucking annoying. You want to take advantage of it. If you don't, that is on you. Shame on you if you don't, but you want to. You definitely need to. Point number 2 is to make sure you know that this is going to be confirmed. This is a thing. This is going to happen. And find a factual statement from the website, the company, whatever you want to find it, from PSO2 saying this is going to happen. For Japanese PSO2, we are going to get ones in these certain dates because of the web panel event that we did for the 8th year anniversary. Once again, you can see that in the description. We're getting one on August 12th, and then there will be another one in September. This is not going to fucking change. You want to make sure you prep yourself before Affix Week comes around, because the moment it kicks in, you want to take full advantage from the time it starts to the time it ends. The other thing is, you want to make sure that if someone does say it verbally and it's a speculation and it's going around the damn place, you don't want to buy your materials too quickly, because that might change. You don't want to buy a shit ton of materials, like let's say you decide to spend 30 mil on a bunch of fodder materials or a bunch of abilities and stuff, and you don't get that affix boost on that certain day. You want to make sure you have a confirmed statement from PSO2 saying they will have that boost week. You don't want to spend your money elsewhere when you can spend your money on something that you can get right there and then. For example, if you wanted to get a certain fashion item, you could have used that 30 mil for it, but then you spent that 30 mil on a bunch of abilities, and boost week doesn't come around. Guess what? You're stuck with those items. Yes, you can resell them, but at the same time, you still need those same materials that you need for the actual affix that you are trying to go for. It's just that you need that affix week. You need to make sure you get the confirmation right. You need to make sure that this is going to happen on this date. Point number 3, plan your shit out. Even I had to plan out these different formulas and stuff. Yes, I can try to figure it out in my head, but at the same time, it's best to make sure that everything is laid out in a certain manner. This is why I use PSO2 Affix Simulator. There is another handy device called Affixing Assistance, and this kind of breaks down like an ideal formula that you have, an endgame formula where it will give you what you need to get specifically. This is on you. You can choose either one of the two. I will have a video that will explain more about Affixing Assistance because it's brand new in terms of like how to go about it. It is a very handy tool. It's just that I would personally go to Affix Simulator compared to that, especially if I'm going to be very specific and I'm going to manipulate certain fodder fodder pieces in a certain way that the assistant can't really register depending on X, Y, and Z. Not only do you need to plan it out in terms of how to go about fixing stuff, you need to figure out what the fuck are you doing exactly. I understand that you would want to take full advantage of this 15%, but you need to also note and give a clear reason to why you are doing this. Are you trying to get a bunch of money off of this? Are you trying to get, certain affixes during this time? Are you trying to make something so you can sell, so you can keep, so you can use? What are you doing? Now, this is also a good way to farm for some shit because guess what? Prices do jump during a fix week, and certain abilities right now, even though it's not even a fix week yet. If I go over here to the player market just to show you guys this thing, let's talk about Returner. Now, I think the last time I showed you guys, the Returner ability was kind of high up there in terms of the price. But they're starting to rise to a stupid number. And this is just a one slot. Returner 1. This thing is fucking 5 mil. That's like 2 to 3 characters worth of weekly ARX missions right here. For just a Returner 1. So what do you plan to do? Not only are you prepping yourself mentally, but you need to know the nitty-gritty stuff. You need to know the exact details of what you are doing. You don't want to do this during boost week because it will waste a bit of time. Granted that, yes, you can do it during boost week, but the thing about boost week is that you want to take full advantage of it upon its start and its end. Unless you know and you're comfortable with a bunch of affixes and you can do stuff in your head or various percentages and how certain things work, then you can ignore this point where I emphasize on the nitty-gritty stuff, on the exact details. But if you're not comfortable with it and you had to use a Affix Simulator or an assistant to help you finalize a bunch of stuff, then you would want to plan it out because you need to figure out what exactly am I doing with these fodder pieces? How much am I spending? What abilities do I need to go for? How exactly am I going to put these abilities and all that jazz? There's a bunch of variables and factors you got to consider and think about, and you don't want to do it during boost week unless you know what you are doing. I, for one, have demonstrated this here and there with my Affix videos, especially with the one playlist that I have talking about live affixes and how I go about it. I don't need to go through an Affix Simulator to think about, like, this is what I'm going to do. I might need to think about the very concept in itself, how much money I'm spending and how much I'm gaining out of it, but at the same time, it's like, it doesn't take me forever, it doesn't take me hours or like days to figure out what I'm doing exactly. I can get right into an affix. So, unless you get to that point, I advise you to actually plan out your shit before Affix week comes around. Point number 4, you want a shit ton of fodder pieces, especially in terms of weapons and our units at various slot numbers. Now, when it comes to the actual abilities you may need, this is going to be its own separate point, but if you were trying to upslot a bunch of junk, especially in terms of weapons and our units, you would need to have a bunch of weapons and our units you can easily dispose of or use so you can get to certain slot numbers. You can see that I have a bunch of 8 slot 14 star weapons. Obviously, I could trade in these 14 stars to get 5 Excubes or descent them to get the materials I need to do a bunch of crafting here and there. But ultimately, when it comes to dim weapons, I can easily get these by doing divided quests. This is like an end-game content. It's not going to hurt me as much. In terms of units as well, you can see I stockpile on a bunch of stuff. Some of these are useful materials that I will need to use. But ultimately, these are items that I'm going to be using here and there for a fixed week and trying to gamble on certain things. So yeah, you want to stock up on weapons in our units at various slot numbers, especially in terms of the junk. Yes, this thing right here, like a 2-slot loser with a Gloom Resist 1, it's a piece of shit. But if I can try to use this as a fodder piece so I can upslot it to the right number that I needed to go at, especially if I have like a 2-slot that I need to upgrade to 3-slot, 3-slot to 4-slot, 4-slot, 5-slot, etc, etc. This is what I want to use. I want to use a bunch of fucking junk compared to some of the good stuff that I will need to use later. So point 5 is actually a branch off to 5A and then a 5B. 5A is in reference to those who plan to farm for these abilities and not spend as much in terms of buying these abilities off of the market. This is you actually going out of your way to get these certain materials, these certain abilities. 5B is for those who plan to spend a certain budget and not go with option A. Maybe they do have a couple fodder pieces or materials or abilities that they need so they can finalize their stuff, but they would most likely spend a lot more in spending an X amount of meseta on the market to easily get these pieces. Depending on your preference, you would want to go to the description and look for those time skips. If you want to see both regardless of what you are personally going to do, that is on you. When it comes to this option, pretty much you are going to farm for these before Affix week comes around. Hopefully you know how to go about it. I am going to make a video playlist talking about it. I know I haven't made it yet, but I will do it in due time. But when it comes to this option, you are pretty much stockpiling on the things you need. A good example of an ability that you might want to farm would be Reveries, Loser, Double, a Progena, Elder, Persona. Those are Reveries you'll need, and if you try to make a Mana Reverie, guess what? You would need these Reveries and try to make a Catalyst. You also need Omega Reverie. Yeah, Omega Reverie with Fabulous Soul and Historia Soul. The quest you want to spam or keep your eyes out for would be Requiem of the Spectre's Grudge. This is the Persona emergency quest. You want to do this on ultra hard if possible. I mean, you can do it on any other difficulty as well. When it comes to the Reverie drops, it will be RNG. Most of the times you'll get Persona. If you can get anything else that is good on you, you want to stockpile on these and just hold on to them. This is just one of the abilities or a couple abilities you would want to aim for. You can obviously once again use this to your advantage in terms of making a bunch of affixes for yourself, or you can sell these so you can earn a profit. Or maybe you will just want to make a bunch of them for later when the time comes to put this on a new unit set, or with some other abilities you might have in mind for the future. This depends on how you go about it, but ultimately this option is to farm for the stuff before Affix week comes around. 5B is pretty much you spending Meseta. Obviously you can mix 5A, which is you farming, with 0.5B, which is you spending Meseta, but this is going to be more specific about certain other things depending on how much you're spending and all that. For one, you need to figure out how much you're spending in terms of getting your final fix. How much is your final fix? You need to do a bit of math. You need to start the market and figure out, like, okay, so this is how much is this and this is how much is this. There's a bit of calculation to it in terms of figuring out how much you are spending. Now, if you have a certain budget, then you can't really go for endgame abilities and you will need to rethink some things. For example, let's say you want to try to do something like with Mana Rev, Astro Soul, and Ethifactor at a 5 slot with various other abilities like Crack 5 or Returner 5, along with Doombreak 3. You need to stat these prices and then do a bit of calculations to figure out if you can actually fit that budget. If you have a fixed budget, you have something that you already have set in stone, like I'm only spending 50 mil. You will need to actually revise a bunch of stuff to fit that criteria so you can stay at that 50 mil. If you have a bit more money, obviously you can tamper around with it and change it. And if you have enough money to actually get the ideal formula that you want by looking at a player market and figuring out like certain things here and there, then yes, you can do what you need to do. But the biggest thing is, depending on if you actually have a budget, this will play a huge factor to how you go about spending and making certain things. Secondly, you would want to buy the fodder materials beforehand because certain abilities will actually jump in price, and when it comes to Affix week, it's going to be a huge supply and demand sort of chain. Some abilities may not have a huge effect if you buy a bunch of its unit pieces or weapon pieces compared to some other abilities where if you buy a bunch of them, it's going to spike up drastically. For example, let me go and stare at Returner ability. Now the Returner ability is a hard ability to actually farm for, because you need to go through adoption and stuff. I'm gonna make a separate video testing out a bunch of things here and there, but understand that, oh god, this thing jumped from like, I think last time I stared at this thing it was like 3 mil, now it's fucking 6 mil for 1 slot Returner 3. Yeah, this thing jumped, and yeah, I'm fucking surprised about that. Yeah, if you are trying to get into getting a returner ability, you might as well get one. I would say go for it in 1 slots, but I don't know how much a 1 slot is right now. 1 slots, they're jumping up as well, so this is on you. This depends on your budget and all that jazz. I would look at Elder Reverie instead now, because this is one of the popular abilities that people would buy out of all the different types of Reveries. Persona was high up there. Let's stat what a 5 slot is. So you can see that a 5 slot is roughly around 400,000. It's not that bad, but you need to scroll down and stare at where it starts to spike up. Now it's look like it stays at a constant rate around 400,000 to 500,000, so it's not that bad. but it might change over the course of time, especially with Affix week. And if you need to buy more of these during Affix week, this might change. Once again, it depends ultimately on what's going on in game. We do have the emergency quest persona, or like Spectre of the Grudge, whatever it's, Requiem of the Spectre of the Grudge, something along those fancy lines. We do have that emergency quest, so this does also play a factor to the prices, but at the same time, this will increase because, you know, supply and demand and that jazz. And you're not the only one trying to buy a bunch of fodder pieces, so it's best to try to get them beforehand for some of these, depending on what the ability is. You just need to do research and stir into the market. I would point to another ability, which would be Doombreak. Now, Doombreak is hard to acquire because usually you get these through the collab events. Now, we don't have any sort of collab event going on, so these things are hard to acquire unless you get a bunch of Doombreak ones and then slowly build your way up to a Doombreak 2 and then to a Doombreak 3. You can see for a 5-slot, Doombreak ones aren't that bad, but like a 2-slot Doombreak 2, it is roughly around 3.4 mil, and then guess what a Doombreak 3 is at? It's at 13 mil. So these things are very, very costly. And if you need multiple copies, guess what? You'll need to buy multiple copies. Crack, for example, it shouldn't be that bad because they were dropping on the 8th year limited quest that was going on over here in the Japanese PSO2. So Crack, it shouldn't be... Oh, well, it's actually jumping in price. I can guess why, because once again, Affix week is coming around and people will most likely demand these things, especially at these high slot numbers. You can see that it slowly increased as I... Well, no, I don't want to increase that. As I go to the different grades, like Crack 1, Crack 2, Crack 3 out of 5 slots. If you're able to get your hands on lower grade ones, that might play a key role into getting into a 5 slot. No. Some people are smart about this, and they'll realize like you'll try to upslot it, and they'll charge the lower grades as well. Holy fucking shit, they did such a thing. So yeah, people are aware that, you know, Affix week is coming around and they're increasing the price. This guy Dance Boom, for example, there's a bunch of them, so it's not gonna go as high, but it depends on the buyers and stuff. So yeah, you just need to stay at the market and figure out what you need to do and how you can prep yourself for it. Point number 6 is to have a bunch of Excubes. You can see that I have 11,000 in my storage. I've been farming a bunch, and I can turn in a bunch of weapons that I have in my storages so I can get more Excubes. The reason why you want to have a bunch of Excubes is because if you need to buy 40% from the Excube shop, you want to make sure you can do that, because if you do not have 100% in your ability transfer, you would want to get these 40% to try to increase it to 100% if possible. If not, you want to push that number close to that thing. You do not want a huge margin of error in your final fixes, because it's going to hurt you in terms of you finalizing your stuff and getting what you want to get. Point number 7 is to have a bunch of ability success rate boosters. You can have a bunch of them, like the 5%, 10%, 30%, 40%, 45%. There are 50s and it's 60. This will depend on what you are doing in game and which one you want to use, but you want to have these on hand. When it comes to the boost week that's going to kick in, you might also want to consider that as well, especially since this is a 15%. Good example of me talking about what you would want to use when it comes to ability success rate boost with a huge number like a 15%, you would want to use that in a lot of things. Now, if you were trying to finalize something and make sure nothing gets fucked over, or you want to increase your chances as high as you can, once again, you would want to go for higher ability success rate boosters, especially if you got 45s or 50s. But when it comes to something like gambling and trying to earn a profit from it, making a bunch of catalysts, for example, this will fall ultimately on what you are doing, because if you're trying to get a bunch of money out of this, you might want to go for low, or you might not want to go all out. For example, in my logic, in my breakdown, in the way I go about this, if I were to make a bunch of catalysts and I want to sell them, I would not want to use the 40% as much. Yes, that will increase my chances, but it's only a 10% difference compared to me using a 30%. With the 15% affix week boost that is kicking in, with a soul catalyst or any sort of catalyst in general, usually it's a 10% transfer. The only time it's a bit different is if you use a pop item for that or you do something else. But when you try to transfer this catalyst, it is usually, or you make a catalyst, it is at a 10%. There's no soul that can boost it. There's no other way to boost it. You cannot stack on this ability. It will be at a 10%. So without any boost week, you decide to use a 30%. Guess what? That 10% now becomes a 40% with that 30% boost. If you use a 40%, you're pushing that 10% to become a 50%, but you're using a 40%. That thing costs 100 Excube. Now with a boost week, especially with the 15%, guess what? That 10% now becomes a 25%. You add a 30% to it, guess what, now it's 55%. Obviously, once again, this falls on you and how you want to go about it. You can use a 40% to increase that 25% to a 65%, but there's still a 35% chance that it will fail. Do you really want to use that? And not only that, when it comes to the 30%, you can easily get these per character per week if you do your weekly ARCs missions. I have 20 characters. There's roughly around like 4 weeks in a month. So guess what? 4 times 20 is 80. I have been getting or stockpiling a bunch of 30% and I can get 80 in a month. So I'm getting free 30%, and if I want to, and if I want to gamble as well, then I might as well use these free 30% to see if I can get the gamble to succeed, if I can get these catalysts to be produced and then sell them as they are without having to spend a bunch of Excubes on this, and this. Ultimately, this falls on you, but this main point is to use the ability success rate boosters when you need to, or if you need to. Point number 8 is to use ability protection items when need be. This will vary on what you are doing specifically, but if you have really good fodder pieces that cost you a shit ton of money and you have these ability protections, you want to use them so you don't lose that chance of, you know, redoing all your hard work. Because understand that if you are going for high abilities and high fodder pieces that are fucking atrocious to remake again, then you would want to use these protections. When it comes to what most players could go for, they can go for the 4-slot protections, but when it comes to the 5-slot, 6-slot, and 7-slot, you have to actually play with the gacha system, the AC scratch in, or the star gems. Some of them you can get as a natural drop, depending on what the scratch is. If it's a support item scratch, for example, for star gems in or ACs, you can get these as a choice, as a selection. But I got most of mine through the, bonus for doing a bunch of scratches. When it comes to the 4-slot ones, you can get them through the recycle shop. All you need to do is go over here and then go to this option over here, the ability 4 slots. If you're playing on North America, they don't have this yet. They will add it in due time. You need to trade in 10 AC items. Right now it's 8 because there is a 20% off for recycle shop usage and Star Gem recycle shop, and then there's also the limited AC. If you haven't seen the limited, no, it's not limited AC, it's the limited AC recycle shop, you should check that video out. It's extremely important because they have pop items. Now guess what's my next point? Point number 9 is to make sure you secure or get the pop items you need, the add ability booster items you can use here and there. When it comes to doing the ability transfer process, you would need to use these so you can increase a slot number. When it comes to you finalizing something, you would want to use these so you can actually add another good ability onto your weapon and or unit. When it comes to these items as well, guess what? You can actually use these and place it on a certain fodder piece so you don't need to actually manipulate it in your formula and get it the normal way. These are handy items you would want to get. Are you able to get them? It will depend on your wallet because they do come with a certain price, and some of these items are actually unavailable to the some players because some of these can be star gem only or like non-tradable stuff. Some of them are very unique, like this one for example. You cannot buy this. This was from the star gem scratch, for example, the attack fusion 2. This gets all attack plus 25, dex plus 40, and then plus 3 PP. So some of these you cannot get, but you would want to try to get your hands on a couple of add ability items depending on your budget and also what you are doing in game. And that concludes my video talking about Boost Week and how you should prep it. Some of these things you might not be able to do. Yes, you can see my face. I deleted the footage that I needed to use for the end credits, so I'm just going to use this as an alternative. So if you don't have protection items, you don't really need them, but at the same time, if you're trying to go all out and you're making sure that, you know, you keep the fodder pieces that you made that cost like maybe 100 fucking mil or more, you will want to use protections if you get them or if you have them, along with several other things as well. I still need to make a bunch of guides videos talking about various things as well, especially in terms of affixing. I haven't really explained how you can use the pop items to your advantage and how you can manipulate it to the point where you can save a shit ton of money, but I will do that in due time. This video will be released a bit late. I had to deal with a bunch of other stuff in real life as well. So hopefully you guys can see this by tonight. And by tonight I'm referring to Monday night. And I think that's pretty much it. Now, there's one thing I do need to point out. If you want to add more to this as well, you can definitely put it in the comments. If you have any questions as well, you can put it down there as well. I do need to point out the fact that you don't really need to have ability transfer passes during this process. yes, you can use them and you can do the function in game, so you can finalize some of your stuff, especially with how my friend is trying to get a bunch of resources so they can actually get that 350T attack that they're looking for. Then, you know, get a time ability and make it into a 420. That'll be nice to see. However, they don't need to really use the boost week to that use. They don't need to use that 15% to help them get the ability transfer pass. It's guaranteed. All you need to do is make sure you have the money, you have the fee for it, and then you also have a bunch of ability transfer passes. So you can do ability transfer passes, it's just that it's not mandatory during Affix week. Everything else I covered in the video is something you would want to consider and you want to use during this time. And ultimately, when it comes to like the entire point of this video as well, point number 3 is what you really need to emphasize on, which is to plan shit out, because if you don't plan everything out, then you get to bump into all these issues. Hopefully my videos can help you guys when it comes to breaking these things down. If you want to share those videos as well and, you know, try to teach a friend or someone how to go about fixing, especially if they're playing PSO2, go ahead and do that. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.